Congressman Pepper, welcome to Jacksonville and welcome to Worth Quoting. We're very honored to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you, sir. In a Times Magazine article that appeared last year, you were said to be, and I quote, like a vintage automobile with new parts. He gets better and more powerful with age. What's the secret to that vitality?
Well, the Lord's been mighty good to me. I'm 83 years old, looking forward to being 84 in September. I've had generally good health all my life. I work long hours. I like to keep busy. And the main thing, I think, is that I'm always looking forward to tomorrow, to the next year, trying to get some things done that I think should be done. And I have many pleasant recollections of the past, but I encourage all older people to live continually in the future, not just in the past.
Wonderful.
And so I never think of myself as being a man altogether of the past. I got too much to do in the years ahead, I feel.
That's wonderful. And we're fortunate that you have that philosophy. You certainly disprove every myth that we have about aging. What do you think about stereotyping? Are we guilty of stereotyping older people?
You know, I think sometimes there's not a good understanding of older people. A lot of people think that you become different when you grow older. As a matter of fact, you're just more of the same thing, as it were. You're not different at all. I used to be on the cross-country team when I was in college. I could run 10 miles in the afternoon. I walk faster than nearly anybody who walks with me, but I can't run 10 miles, but I got a good car. If I need to go 10 miles, I can go in that. But fortunately, the Lord has enabled me to keep busy, to be active, to be alert physically and mentally. And in that way, I'm thinking of the future, as I said, and I think elderly people are often misunderstood. They think, oh, they're old, they don't want to do all these things that we are doing. You know, even a little child can tell when he or she is not wanted. You may be sure that older people can tell when they're not wanted. They can tell when there's a feeling that they're the extras, that they just rather not have them messing up the party or this, that, or the other, you know. So, you know, there's an old saying that even a dog can tell the difference between being stepped on and being kicked. And so the old folks are pretty alert about sensing whether they're wanted or whether they're received cordially, and so we should treat them just like everybody else.
How do you feel about the way older people are portrayed in commercials and on television?
Well, I mean, we've complained to the commercial television stations and radio stations about that. They're making some improvement now, we think, and they must make a great deal more improvement, not to get some silly old person, you know, that won't be very astute mentally, very alert mentally, and sort of badly, you know, make fun of them. Well, the elderly people are not that way. Those that, most of them are mentally, the mind is the last thing to go, unfortunately, of the body and all of its acquisitions. So it's unfair and it's wrong for the media to do that. We're trying to stop them from stereotyping old people, and they tell me they're beginning to diminish their doing that.
Well, Congressman Pepper, you've been the unquestioned force behind the Social Security system reforms. You've been called the champion of the elderly. And we know that you fought against cuts in benefits, but how stable is our Social Security system?
The Social Security system is the stablest and the most solvent and sound I think it's ever been. We put $163 billion new money in behind Social Security in 82 and 83. The recommendation that our Social Security Commission, of which I was a member, made in 1983. And we anticipated even bad times in the future and inquired, would Social Security still be solvent and sound if we had bad times, unless we had a disastrous depression like the 30s, We've got the money in prospect or in being that the Social Security system will need, and it's all that it needs. For example, right now, the Social Security Trust Fund has adequate funds on hand. We have an anticipated surplus that will come along at about 1990 due to the demographic situation that will be developing at that time. And the prospects are, even if in the years 2000 and thereafter, there should be a little shortage, we've got funds laid aside for that. So unless there's a disaster that we can't contemplate, Social Security is solvent and sound for the next 75 years. And the regrettable thing, and I don't say it just to make political capital, regrettable thing is that the politicians keep on talking about tearing it up, restructuring it, revising it, and the like. Not long ago, on the 28th of March, the president had an interview in his office with the New York Times newspaper, and in there he just all of a sudden said that the Social Security system needs to be revised, revamped, and restructured. My goodness, we just spent 18 months going through that agony. A little while before that, he had said that he thought it was solvent and sound. I complimented the president when he walked off of the platform where he signed the bill that we had recommended and the Congress had enacted. The Speaker and I, you may remember if you've seen the picture, were standing right behind the president. And the president made a good statement about the solvency and the soundness of Social Security. And lo and behold, on the 28th of March, I reckon he had nothing else to talk about, and he popped off and said that about Social Security. Then in the following Sunday, on one of the TV programs, then along came the Secretary of the Treasury, and he said, we're going to have to change the complexion of Social Security. The well-to-do people, we're going to have to get them off. Well, if you get them off, it changes it from a social insurance program, which it is and has been, to a welfare program, where you have to meet a means test to become eligible for its benefit. And so we were terribly upset about that. I made a little statement about it on the floor of the House. Well, then the country began to be heard from, because, you know, after all, the people still run this country. Some people in Washington every now and then get the idea they run it, but the people run this country. So they began to remonstrate about that, to tear up their prospective Social Security benefits, and then the President and the Secretary of the Treasury said, we will not touch Social Security benefits as long as the President's in the White House. That included in case he should be elected for another term. So we hope the politicians will just let Social Security alone. We provided soundness and stability for it. You remember 36 million people get a Social Security check every month. About $400 a month is the average of those checks. Yet, in spite of that Social Security, about 1/6 of the American elderly people still have incomes below the poverty level. So we desperately need Social Security, need it as it is today. And the Democrats, I can assure you, because I'm on the platform drafting committee, and I was working on it last night, and I got some of the stuff in my bag today. And I'm sure we're going to come up with a platform. There won't be any diminution in Social Security benefit.
Well, I suppose we can't talk about Social Security without talking about health care costs, and certainly we've had a lot of changes in health care costs and a lot of needs in that area. We're hearing a lot of new terms like HMO and cost containment. What is your opinion of cost containment?
We now have a comparable problem with Medicare to the one we had with Social Security in 82 and 83. Now we solved that one in a sensible, well-balanced way. Now then, we've got to solve the problem of Medicare, because the older people of this country who require about twice as much Medicare care, hospitalization, as younger people, simply have to have the thing we call Medicare, the public assistance in getting, it's like Social Security, you know. You pay into it just as you pay into Social Security. But however, within 4 years, if the costs continue to go up of medical care in the hospitals and from the doctor's fees and pharmaceuticals and other things, why the funds will not be available to meet all the demands of Medicare. So we've got to do something between now and 4 years from now to stabilize it as we stabilize Social Security. Now, the way I think is the best way to do it is by the use of health maintenance organizations, HMOs, preferred provider organization, and I've introduced a bill to authorize hospitals to become HMOs so that a hospital can enter into a contract with the Medicare authorities to furnish medical care to those people, take over the responsibility of Medicare and furnish that information, that material assistance to themselves. So now I was pleased around at the Rotary Club a while ago to have a doctor come up and tell me that he liked what I said about the HMOs. He thinks we need to use them more. The HMOs have expanded vastly in the country. I was talking to the chairman of the board of the Prudential Life Insurance Company in Washington the other evening, and he said his company had the biggest home HMO there was in the United States. And I spoke in New Orleans a few days ago to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and there were a lot of insurance companies represented there, and I appealed to those insurance companies to become HMOs. Then they could be competing with one another, and they can be taking care of these people. They can provide preventive care, home care. They can provide taking care of the drugs of the elderly people that they consume in the homes. They can provide dental care. They can provide eyeglasses, hearing aids, and foot care, for example, are some of the things that the elderly need the most. And they can do it cheaper than it's costing at the present time. We can save money for the government, money for the patient, and money for get more care, more medical care for the people. But now the Advisory Commission of the Social Security Commission a few days ago issued a report, and their way of their recipe for meeting the problems of Medicare was to make the people pay more. But many of them are already paying more than they can afford now. It costs an elderly person $356 to go to a hospital, and next year it'll cost more, even the way it is now. Well, now a lot of people don't have nearly $400 to write them a check when they go into a hospital. And so then, in addition to that, they said also, let's just raise the age of eligibility. Instead of their becoming eligible at 65, make them wait till 67. Well, if they don't have any money, what are they going to do for medical care between 65 and 67? They're just not going to have any medical illness, not going to have any medical need, any hospital need. It's ridiculous to do that. You're just turning people loose to suffer, maybe to die, during an interim there, which should not exist. So we are strenuously opposed to any reduction in Social Security benefits. We want an increase in Medicare assistance, and we want less money to be paid and less money to be spent by the government. That can be done. We are proving it in experimental operations all around over the country.
Encouraging.
With the HMOs.
Congressman, we've been kept apprised of the activity involved in the reauthorization of the Old Americans Act.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate our ever having to have a means test for services through the Old Americans
No,
Act?
it should not. It should not exist now. But now they've spent so much money on defense that every other nickel that's expended is reserved very circumspectly, and we're jealous of this almost. So I don't know, but the means test is objectionable. I should say obnoxious.
We were glad to see that some things were left in the Act, such as training and research. We know that you're very interested in research, and especially with health-related issues such as Alzheimer's disease and others, and we were happy to see that.
We should spend a lot more money. My dear wife died 5 years ago with cancer, and if you had to have the doctor come and tell you that we've lost control of the tumor, but is anything else? Well, we can try some things, but we don't have anything else that we know of. that's any good. And that means that the end is near. So I would, if I had my way about it altogether, I would increase vastly the amount of expenditure we make for research. We are losing to cancer alone over 400,000 people a year in our country. Now, if an enemy were coming in here and capturing and killing 400,000 of our people, we wouldn't spare any expense to fight him and to make him stop doing that. But yet, they've got up to $1 billion now, a little over $1 billion, the amount of expenditure on cancer, and they're scared to death, the members of Congress. They're afraid, well, if we go beyond that, they say if we can't find it with $1 billion, well, when President Kennedy said, let's go to the moon, he didn't say, provided we can do it for $1 billion. And when they started to build the hydrogen bomb, the atom bomb, they didn't say, now, provided we could do it for $1 billion. If it costs more than that, we can't do it. They said, we're going to build the bomb, and we're going to the moon, and we did both. And we could find the cure. Only 26%, for example, of the applications for research grants for cancer are funded. Now, who knows if all those other 64, whatever it is, were funded, who knows but what that might be the answer in one of those research programs.
Exactly. We know that a lot of your emphasis is on prevention.
That's exactly
and
right.
so we're happy, and we applaud your efforts in that area. What are you doing right now? Are you working, going to be involved in the upcoming election?
Yes, ma'am. I've been to about 14 states, I think, speaking for Mr. Mondale, and going, of course, several times in most of the states. I'm on the drafting committee at Mr. Mondale's request, direction, and we had our meeting, our first meeting last night. I got the prospective draft in my briefcase that I'm going over. We're going to be meeting the next 2 or 3 days. Now that's the drafting committee. And eight Mondale people on there, and 2 alternates. And then, in addition to that, I'm on the platform committee. And then I'm on a subcommittee that will deal with this subject of health care, elderly Americans and all that. So for the next 2, 3, 4 days, we're going to be tied up. I've got my duties to do over on the Hill, so I'm getting another member of the Rules Committee to preside for me tomorrow over there. And then we're going to move the hearings of the drafting committee up to the Hill so we can run and vote on the immigration bill, which is going to be up tomorrow and next day. So we keep pretty busy.
I say you do. After 14 years as a United States Senator, now in 21 years as a congressman from Miami, when you look at the wonderful, astonishing career that you've had, what's the proudest thing of your career? What is the thing that brings you the most pride and the most joy?
Well, without appearing sentimental, the greatest sense of satisfaction is that the Lord permitted me a wonderful wife for 43 years. But other than that, I think the greatest satisfaction I have is that there's some things to which I can look back with some satisfaction that maybe I made life a little better for a good many people in a good many years.
Yeah.
And I encourage all young people that try to select the thing you like to do. That if you work at night, if you work Saturdays, Sundays, you don't complain about it because you like your work. It's honorable, some remunerative within reason, but after all, something when you're way down the road and you look back and say, well, you know, I believe I've done a few things that have made life a little better for the people that have come along with me or behind me. And that gives me a great deal of satisfaction. And there are a lot of things I'm still planning to do. You know, I got a long time out there yet. I'm only 83.
That's right. And you of course, fathered the elimination of the mandatory retirement, and you certainly were influential in that. And
there was the five of the institutes that were set up in the National Institutes of Health that I was a principal author of, and I got the Lasker Awards, and I was the first to set up the International Health Organization and so on, a good many, and I was co-author of the first cancer research program, and had something to do with it when it first became a major program of the government, and so on. So cancer, heart disease, and arthritis, and blindness, and so many other things I've had something to do with. We tried to do a lot more.
I read a quote that of yours that said that mandatory retirement should be when you can't do the job anymore.
Yeah.
Is that?
Well, mandatory retirement was never intended, or should never have been intended, for people on an artificial or irrelevant criteria like age, any more than it should be based on sex or race. Now it's a law of the land that you can't discriminate on account of sex or race. Now we've put it into the fabric of our law. You can't discriminate on age, because there's so many people differ so much. As George Bernard Shaw said, some people are old at 17, some are young at 70. And I'm 83. If I'd quit work at 65, I spoke to a friend of mine a while ago who was in law school with me in 1921 to 24, and he said he'd quit playing golf. He practiced, but he'd quit playing. I said, go back to playing. I know he plays well anyway, but keep busy, keep doing something. Don't allow yourself to become inactive or idle.
And you said that you have some plans for the future. Can you elaborate on that? Can you tell us what you're...
Well, the thing that I'm most concerned about, and I often say that the Lord's been good to me, but I hope he'll spare me long enough to see in our beloved country a program under which every man, woman, and child will be able to get the medical care that he or she should have by making whatever payment he or she is able to make. If he can pay a penny, if he can pay $100, if he can't pay anything, he should get it. Human life is given of God, and it's a precious possession, and it should not be wasted away when there's some medical science or some skill or some facility to save it. And I just hope that I can contribute to there being a time in our country where there'll be a system that'll be well designed, be thoroughly American in character, be fair to everybody, but will accomplish that wonderful result of assuring every man, woman, and child that you can get the medical care that you need, if you need it.
That's a wonderful goal. Congressman Pepper, you have remained popular with your peers, regardless of party. And it was said that during the last election that wherever you traveled, you came away with the votes, no matter. And
we had pretty good luck.
I say you did.
We've had pretty good luck around in the Mondale campaigns, and it's been a pleasure to campaign for Mr. Mondale because he's a clean, dedicated, honorable man, and he shares these views I have about. He was co-author of the Medicare program in the Senate, and he was also co-author of the Older Americans Act, and he was the author of the children's lunch program at school and so on. Those things are very close to his heart, because you see, he was a protege of Senator Hubert Humphrey, and Hubert Humphrey was one of the most caring men I've ever known that we've ever had in the Congress, and he followed right in his footsteps. And so when Mondale came to Congress, he followed right in the footsteps that Hubert Humphrey had followed, and he was a great humanitarian. So the other day I was talking to Mr. Mondale on the phone, and I said, told him about this, I want everybody to get medical. He said, I'm with you 100%.
Let's talk about the popularity of Claude Pepper, though. You are loved and revered by your constituents and your peers, and even though you have represented your party with some very controversial issues, such as Social Security reform and Older American Act reauthorization, you have remained popular with your peers. Now, to what do you owe that?
Well, I think, if anything, the fact that I've tried to be fair. In debate, I've tried to be fair and honorable. Probably as good an example of that as anything is the other day, our Rules Committee, of which I'm the chairman, had to formulate a rule to provide for the consideration on the floor of this very controversial, very bitterly fought immigration bill. We'd been working on it off and on since last fall. And finally, I just kept bringing in people, consulting with them, getting in the people that were opponents as well as proponents, and setting. Now this is, finally we got up to the last 2 days, the 7th and 8th of this month. And so then on the morning of the 7th, we had all the Democrats on our committee to sit down and discuss the matter. That afternoon we brought the Republicans in, and we all discussed it among ourselves. Then late that afternoon I brought in about 25 other people, chairmen of other committees, people that are offering amendments and all. I said, now gentlemen, ladies, this is the kind of rule we're going to promulgate. We plan to put forth. Now I want you to see whether you think it's fair or not. Well, it wound up with remarkable assent. And then we fixed up a format, put it in what we call the committee print. We had 69 amendments that we made in order. And we put each one in the order in which it was to be offered in this committee print. They were said, even the Speaker said he wouldn't be surprised if our rule were defeated. We won by 291 to 111, the rule. Everybody was said, you know, that was a fair rule.
Well, you are remarkable.
Well,
Congressman Pepper.
That's what I've tried to do.
We appreciate your sharing with us today. We're so honored to have you in Jacksonville. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to come. And we want you to know from our hearts how much we love and appreciate you, and for all that you've done for the city of Jacksonville, for the elderly of the United States. We are indeed grateful, and we do thank you for coming.
Now, let me say that I'm profoundly grateful to you for the privilege of being here with you. Those kind things you say are very meaningful to me. They are stimulating to me, and they are inspiring, and I appreciate it very much. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday evening. We had a meeting of the drafting committee, and that's the reason I had to be there yesterday evening. Couldn't be here, but I'm profoundly grateful. I'm very proud of this fine institution you have here. I want to see, incidentally, at all the institutions of our government and states, I want to see elderly people able to come without charge and get any improvement of their skills or any diversification of their skills that might be available to them, so they'd be qualified to do a better job of what they've been doing, or else qualified to move over into another area and do that very creditably. So these institutions of yours, these junior colleges, have been marvelous contributors to the better education and development of our people.
Thank you, sir. And now some of our audience have questions for you.